The sky was soft blue, and the sun was rising slowly, throwing golden light across the open ground where the event was about to take place. Flags moved gently in the breeze, and chairs were arranged in neat rows. It was not a normal day. Today, the city was hosting a gathering to honor veterans who had given their service to the country. Among the invited guests stood Michael, a man with quiet eyes and strong shoulders, though life had not been kind to him after the military. He was a single dad, raising his daughter Anna on his own. His clothes were simple, not new, but clean. His boots showed years of wear. He looked like a man who had carried both pride and pain in silence. Anna stood close to him, holding his hand. She was only 10 years old, but she understood that her father was special. She had seen how hard he worked every day, cooking for her, helping her with homework, and making sure she never felt alone. She also knew that his nights were often heavy, that sometimes he sat in the dark, staring at old photos of men he once fought beside. The event was organized by George, a famous CEO known for his success and wealth. He wanted to show respect to veterans and had invited not only retired soldiers but also young Marines in full uniform. The stage was decorated, cameras were ready, and people filled the seats. George liked to speak with big words about courage and sacrifice, but today something very different was about to happen, something he did not plan. Michael stood near the edge, away from the center. He never liked attention. He had come only because Anna asked him to. She wanted to see her father recognized, to see others know the man she called her hero. Michael agreed, though he felt out of place among the polished uniforms and the suits of businessmen. George took the microphone and welcomed everyone. He spoke proudly about freedom, about honor, about the importance of remembering history. Then he brought out something that made the crowd murmur: a World War II rifle, carefully restored, its wood shining and its steel still strong. It was placed on a table, and George explained that it was a symbol of the past, a reminder of battles fought for freedom. "Who among you would like to hold this piece of history?" George asked, his voice echoing across the field. The crowd grew quiet. The Marines shifted in their seats, glancing at one another. It was not a toy. It was heavy with meaning. Nobody wanted to treat it lightly. For a moment, silence stretched long. Then Michael, standing at the side, stepped forward slowly. His steps were not loud, but they carried weight. People turned their heads to see who this man was. He did not wear a uniform. He did not wear a tie. He looked like an ordinary man, yet there was something in his eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. George raised his eyebrows but handed the rifle to Michael. He expected the man to simply lift it, maybe smile for the cameras. But when Michael's hands touched the weapon, everything changed. He did not fumble. He did not hesitate. His fingers moved over the rifle with memory, with respect. He checked it the way soldiers once did in real battlefields: firm, practiced, careful. The Marines watching leaned forward, their eyes narrowing. They recognized the movements, the discipline. This was not a man pretending. This was a man who remembered. Michael lifted the rifle and held it against his shoulder. The way he stood was balanced, strong, and unshaken, as if the weapon was not strange or old but a part of him. His breathing slowed. His eyes fixed on the distant target placed for demonstration. He moved with a quiet grace, nothing showy, nothing loud, only steady and sure. The crowd held its breath. Even Anna, who had seen her father as just dad, looked up at him with wide eyes. She had never seen this side of him before. He looked taller, stronger, like the stories she had read about heroes. Then the shot rang out. It was sharp, echoing across the open space. Birds flew from the trees nearby. The bullet cut through the air and struck the target with perfect precision. The sound of the impact carried across the field. And then came silence. The Marines did not clap. They did not cheer. Their discipline held them still, but their eyes were filled with respect. They had seen many skilled men in training, but there was something different here. This was not only skill. It was memory, it was sacrifice, it was the weight of history in one steady hand. George, the CEO, had spoken many times about courage. But in that moment, he found no words. He simply stood, his mouth slightly open, staring at Michael. Michael lowered the rifle gently, as if setting down something sacred. His face was calm, almost sad, carrying the weight of those who had once stood beside him in battle and never returned. He turned slightly, looking at Anna. Her small hands clapped softly before anyone else could move. Her pride was pure, shining brighter than the sun. For Michael, that was enough. He did not need applause, nor cameras, nor grand speeches. The look in his daughter's eyes told him what mattered most. She saw him not only as her father but also as a man of honor. The crowd remained in silence, not because they were ordered to, but because they were humbled. Something had been revealed in front of them, something beyond money, beyond rank, beyond titles. And though the shot had already faded into the air, the silence that followed stayed deep, as if every person there had just been reminded of what true respect really was. The echo of the shot was gone, but its memory still hung heavy in the air. No one spoke. No one moved. The Marines stood stiff, their strong faces softened with respect. The CEO, George, who had prepared so many proud words for the event, found his throat dry. He could not force out a single line. Michael lowered the rifle carefully, his movements steady, like someone who understood that this was not just an object but a piece of history, a reminder of men who had once carried it through mud, smoke, and fire. He handed it back with gentle hands, not wanting to let it clatter or lose its dignity. Anna's small voice broke the silence first. "That was my dad," she whispered proudly, though her words were soft. She squeezed his arm, her eyes glowing. Her pride mattered more to Michael than the quiet stares of the Marines or the surprised face of George. He had not stepped forward to impress anyone. He had done it because he knew what the rifle meant, because the memories of his brothers in arms never left his heart. George finally managed to speak. "That was remarkable." His voice trembled, unpolished. He was a man used to power, to control, to speeches that brought applause. But in front of Michael, those tools failed him. He could only admit the truth he felt. One Marine, a young officer named Thomas, took a step forward. His boots struck the ground with purpose. He saluted Michael, his expression filled with respect. "Sir," he said, his voice strong, "I have trained for years, and I have seen many marksmen. But what I saw now, it was not only skill. It was something deeper. It was history carried in your hands." Michael looked at him, his face calm. He did not return the salute but nodded gently. "I only did my duty," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Others gave everything. I only carry their memory." The Marines lowered their heads slightly, as though bowing in agreement. They knew what he meant. They knew that true service was not about medals or perfect shots but about sacrifice and honor. George felt something stir in his heart, something he had long forgotten. He had built towers of steel, companies of wealth, and halls of power. Yet in that moment, in front of this man in worn boots and simple clothes, he felt small. He felt humbled. The program on stage tried to continue, but the air was different now. The speeches that followed felt thin compared to the silence Michael had created. People clapped politely, but their minds were still on the single shot that had spoken louder than any words. When it was over, people gathered in groups, whispering about what they had witnessed. Some looked at Michael from a distance, too moved to approach. Others glanced at Anna, who held her father's hand proudly, her smile bright. Michael wanted to leave quietly, to slip away before anyone could pull him into the center of attention. But George stopped him near the edge of the field. "Michael," he said, his voice softer now, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Michael hesitated but nodded. Anna stood by his side, listening carefully. George looked into his eyes. "You reminded me today that true honor cannot be bought, cannot be staged. You carry something rare. I thought I was here to give honor to veterans, but today, you gave honor to us." Michael shook his head slightly. "I am no different from the men who served beside me," he replied. "Many never came back. They are the true heroes. I only live for them and for her." He looked at Anna, who held his arm tightly. George felt a lump in his throat. "You've shown us something we can never repay," he said quietly. "But please, allow me to try. If there is anything you or your daughter need, I want to help." Michael's pride stirred. He had lived with little, but he had never begged, never asked for more than what his own hands could earn. "We manage," he said simply. "We always do." But Anna's eyes lifted to her father. She wanted him to accept kindness, not for himself, but for her. Michael saw that, and his heart softened. He gave a small nod, not fully agreeing, but not refusing either. George understood. He placed a hand over his chest, a gesture of respect, and stepped back. The Marines, still nearby, approached Michael one by one. They did not speak loudly. They did not joke. They came with respect, each offering a handshake, each leaving with more silence than words. It was not a ceremony planned, but it was a ceremony of the heart. When Michael and Anna finally walked away, the sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Anna skipped beside her father, her small hand swinging in his. "Dad," she said, her voice bright, "today I saw how great you are. Not just to me, but to everyone." Michael smiled faintly, though his eyes carried a shadow of memory. "Greatness, Anna," he said softly, "is not about who sees you. It is about who you carry in your heart." She did not fully understand his words, but she felt their warmth. She leaned against his arm and walked happily beside him. Behind them, George watched. The Marines watched. None of them forgot the silence. None of them forgot the shot that had spoken louder than speeches. And though the event ended, the story of the single dad veteran began to spread quietly, told with respect, repeated with awe. It was not just a story of a rifle. It was a story of love, sacrifice, and the quiet dignity of a man who lived for his daughter and the memory of his brothers. The evening after the event was quiet. Michael sat on the porch of his small house, the wooden boards creaking under his chair. The air smelled of pine, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. Anna was inside, humming softly as she worked on her homework. Michael leaned back, his eyes lost in the distance. The shot he fired earlier still echoed in his mind, not the sound of it, but the silence that followed. It reminded him of old days, of moments when silence came not from respect but from loss. He had seen friends fall in battle, and afterward, the world always felt too quiet. But today, the silence had been different. It was filled not with sorrow but with awe. Still, it stirred memories Michael usually kept locked away. The screen door opened, and Anna stepped out, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed one to him with a wide smile. "Here, Dad. I made it extra sweet." Michael smiled softly, taking the mug. "Thank you, sweetheart." She sat on the step beside him, her legs swinging. "Dad," she began carefully, "today, when you fired that rifle, everyone looked at you like you were a hero. The Marines, the CEO, everyone." Michael took a slow sip, letting the warmth ease him. "I am no hero, Anna," he said. "I just did what I was trained to do. The real heroes are the ones who never came back." Anna frowned. "But you're here. You take care of me every day. Isn't that also being a hero?" Her words struck deep. For Michael, raising his daughter was the hardest and most important mission of all. He looked at her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. "Maybe being a father is its own kind of service." The next morning, the knock on their door surprised them. Michael opened it to see George, the CEO, standing with 2 men in suits. He looked different, less polished, more humble than before. "Michael," George said, "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to see you again. May I come in?" Michael hesitated but stepped aside. George entered, looking around the modest home. The furniture was simple, the walls plain, but the house felt warm and full of care. He noticed Anna's drawings taped on the fridge, her school books stacked neatly on the table. "You live with dignity," George said quietly. "More dignity than many who live in mansions." Michael shrugged. "We live simply. That's enough." George sat down and leaned forward. "I can't stop thinking about yesterday. I invited people to honor veterans, but you gave us something much greater. You showed us what real courage looks like. Not loud. Not proud. Just steady and true." Michael stayed silent, his expression calm. He never liked when people tried to dress simple actions with big words. George continued. "I want to help you. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Your daughter deserves every chance in life. If you allow it, I can arrange support for her schooling, even her future studies." Michael's pride stirred again, but before he could reply, Anna spoke up. "Dad," she said softly, "please, let him help." Michael looked at her. Her eyes were hopeful, not greedy. She didn't want gifts, she wanted opportunities. He sighed and nodded. "If it's for her, I'll accept." George smiled warmly. "Good. Then it's settled. Anna, your future just became brighter." Anna beamed, and for a moment, the weight Michael carried felt lighter. Later that week, word of the event began spreading. Newspapers printed stories about the single dad veteran who silenced the Marines and the CEO. Some people exaggerated, painting Michael as a legend. Others kept it simple, saying he reminded them of old values: honor, humility, love. But Michael ignored the stories. He still woke up early to cook breakfast for Anna, still went to work at the small repair shop, still kept his life plain. Fame meant little to him. What mattered was Anna's smile, her laughter, her steady growth. One evening, as they walked home together, a group of Marines recognized him on the street. They saluted respectfully, their eyes filled with admiration. Michael nodded, not proud, only humble. Anna squeezed his hand tighter, whispering, "They see you like I do, Dad." Michael smiled faintly. "Then maybe I've done something right." At night, as Anna slept, Michael sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. He thought of his brothers, the ones who had never returned. "You would be proud," he whispered into the quiet. "I'm raising her well. For all of us." The silence answered back, gentle and comforting. And so, even as the world whispered about him, Michael remained the same quiet, steady, a father first, a veteran always. He carried the past with dignity and the future with hope, never forgetting that his truest duty was not behind him but beside him, in the form of a little girl who believed he was the greatest hero alive. The days that followed moved slowly, but something had changed in Michael's life. For years, he had lived quietly, unnoticed, carrying his memories like hidden weight. Now, strangers recognized him, Marines saluted him, and even newspapers wrote about him. Yet Michael remained the same. He still woke before dawn, cooked oatmeal for Anna, and walked her to school with her small hand tucked in his. At school, Anna's friends whispered about her father. "Your dad's a hero," they told her. She would nod proudly but never boast. To her, he was simply Dad, the man who read her stories at night, who fixed her broken toys, and who always listened when she needed him. One afternoon, George arrived again at their house. He no longer came with men in suits or photographers. This time, he came alone, dressed in a simple jacket. Michael opened the door with a calm look. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," George said. Michael shook his head and let him in. Anna was drawing at the table and waved politely. George smiled at her before turning back to Michael. "I've been thinking," George began, his tone serious. "I spend my life in meetings, numbers, contracts. But none of that feels as real as what I saw in you that day. You carry honor without asking for it. You carry love without needing applause. That is leadership. That is what men like me forget." Michael sat down across from him. "I don't see myself that way. I just do what I must." George leaned forward. "That's exactly why it matters. You don't seek respect, yet respect follows you. I want others to see that. I want my Marines, my employees, even young people in schools, to hear your story." Michael frowned slightly. "I'm no speaker. I'm no teacher." "Maybe not," George admitted, "but your life speaks for you." Anna looked up from her drawing. "Dad, maybe you should tell people. Maybe they need to know what real courage is." Her innocent voice softened Michael's resistance. He sighed. "I'll think about it." In the weeks that followed, George arranged small gatherings. Michael was asked to attend, not to lecture but to share small pieces of his experience. He spoke simply, never using grand words. He talked about the men he served with, about the weight of duty, about the quiet strength of fathers who come home and keep going for their families. The Marines who listened sat straighter. Some felt tears sting their eyes. Employees from George's company left the room thoughtful, questioning the meaning of success and sacrifice. Michael never raised his voice. He never tried to impress. But everywhere he spoke, silence followed, the same deep silence as the day he fired the rifle. Anna was always by his side, watching proudly. To her, each time he spoke, he was not only honoring the past but also showing her the kind of person she should grow up to be. One evening, after a talk at a local school, a young Marine approached Michael. His name was David, and he looked barely older than 20. His eyes were troubled. "Sir," David said, his voice unsteady, "I don't know if I can be as strong as you. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough." Michael placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Strength is not about never feeling weak," he said. "It is about standing up anyway. You will carry your own weight in your own way. Don't measure yourself by others. Just do your duty, and do it with heart." The young Marine nodded, his eyes filling with gratitude. For him, those words meant more than any medal. At home that night, Anna asked, "Dad, do you ever get tired of helping everyone?" Michael smiled gently. "Sometimes. But helping others gives meaning to my pain. It makes the memories lighter. And it shows you what matters." Anna leaned against him. "Then I'll help people too, when I grow up." Michael kissed the top of her head. "That will be the greatest honor of all." Meanwhile, George continued to watch from the side. Each time Michael spoke, George realized how small his achievements felt compared to the quiet dignity of this veteran. He began to change. He spent less time chasing wealth and more time building programs to support veterans and their families. He wanted his company to stand not just for profit, but for purpose. The Marines also carried the story with them. They told younger recruits about the day a single dad veteran silenced them with one shot, about the lessons he gave afterward. For them, it was no longer just a story, it was a compass. Michael never asked for this attention. He often wished he could fade back into his quiet life. But he also saw what it gave Anna: pride, hope, and lessons she could carry forever. Late one night, as he tucked Anna into bed, she whispered, "Dad, you're not just my hero. You're everyone's hero now." Michael shook his head gently. "No, Anna. If I am anything, it is because of you. You are my reason. You are my strength." She smiled sleepily, her eyes closing. Michael sat beside her for a long time, listening to her soft breathing. Outside, the world was changing because of him. But inside that small room, all that mattered was the little girl who believed in him with her whole heart. And for Michael, that was the only silence he truly needed, the quiet peace of knowing he had given her both love and honor. The story of Michael began to travel further than he ever imagined. Newspapers had written about him, Marines spoke of him, and George used his company's voice to share the lessons he had seen in the quiet veteran. But for Michael, life remained simple. He fixed broken engines at the repair shop, cooked dinner for Anna, and kept their home steady. Still, little by little, his world began to shift. People he didn't know stopped him on the street. Some shook his hand, others simply nodded in respect. Michael never grew comfortable with the attention, but he accepted it politely. His daughter, however, loved seeing it. To her, each handshake and nod was proof that the world finally saw what she had always known, that her father carried greatness in silence. One morning, Michael received a letter with an official seal. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But when he opened it, he saw it was an invitation from the Marine Corps itself. They wanted him to attend a special ceremony at their base. Anna read the letter aloud with excitement, her voice rising with each line. "Dad, they want you to speak," she said, her eyes wide. "The Marines want to hear from you." Michael frowned slightly. "I am no public speaker, Anna. I never liked stages." "But Dad," she said softly, "they're asking because they respect you. They want to learn from you. Isn't that important?" Her words touched him, and he agreed. Not for his own pride, but because he believed he owed something to the younger men and women who carried the uniform now. When the day of the ceremony arrived, Michael wore the same old jacket, clean but worn. Anna walked proudly beside him, her small hand in his. The Marines greeted him at the gate with sharp salutes, and though Michael returned only a simple nod, his presence carried weight. The hall was filled with Marines of all ranks, their uniforms pressed, their faces sharp with discipline. George was also there, seated in the front row, watching with deep respect. When Michael was called forward, he walked with steady steps. He stood at the podium, looking at the rows of young faces before him. For a moment, he was silent. The room waited. Finally, he spoke. "I stand here not as a hero," he said in his calm voice, "but as a man who remembers. I remember the friends I served with, the ones who never came home. Every step I take, I carry them with me. That is what it means to be a veteran. We carry memory, we carry sacrifice, we carry love." The room was still. Every Marine listened, their eyes fixed on him. Michael continued. "Strength is not shown by how loud you speak or how high you stand. It is shown by how much you love, how much you endure, and how you rise again after you fall. I am not strong because I fought battles. I am strong because I live each day for my daughter, and because I honor those who cannot stand here today." His words struck the room like the echo of a rifle. No one clapped, no one moved. They all felt the weight of his truth. Anna watched from the side, her small chest swelling with pride. She knew her father did not seek applause, but in her eyes, he was brighter than anyone else in the room. After the speech, young Marines approached him quietly, one after another. Some asked questions, some only shook his hand, and a few simply said, "Thank you." For them, Michael was not just a veteran, he was living proof of what it meant to carry honor without seeking it. Later, George spoke with him privately. "Michael," he said, "do you realize what you're giving these men and women? You are giving them more than training, more than discipline. You are giving them meaning." Michael shook his head. "I only speak from the heart. If they find meaning in it, then maybe it was worth sharing." That night, after they returned home, Anna climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly. "Dad," she whispered, "I think today you gave them the same gift you give me every day." Michael looked at her with gentle eyes. "And what gift is that?" She smiled. "You gave them hope." Her words settled deep in his heart. He kissed the top of her head and held her close. "Hope," he said softly. "Yes, that is what keeps us all alive." In the days that followed, the Marines continued to share Michael's words. They carried them into training sessions, into quiet talks with each other, into letters home. And everywhere they spoke of him, they also spoke of the silence he created, the silence of respect, the silence of truth. Michael, however, returned to his ordinary life. To him, nothing had changed. He was still a father, still a man who worked hard to keep food on the table. But Anna could see it clearly, her father was no longer just her hero. He was now a guide for others, a voice that reminded even the strongest soldiers of the power of humility, memory, and love. And though the world outside seemed to grow louder with his story, Michael found peace in the quiet moments at home, where Anna's laughter was the only sound that truly mattered. Life continued in a quiet rhythm for Michael and Anna. The story of the day he fired the World War II rifle and left everyone silent had grown into something bigger than he ever imagined, but at home, he remained the same man, a father, a provider, a steady presence. George had stayed in touch, quietly arranging opportunities for Anna's schooling and future. He did not flaunt it or make it a show. For Michael, that mattered. It was not charity, it was respect. And that respect touched Michael more than any applause or headline ever could. Anna thrived. Her school praised her curiosity and kindness. She spoke often of her father, but she never exaggerated. To her, he was simply extraordinary because of who he was, not because the world noticed him. One afternoon, Michael received a call from the Marine Corps. They invited him to participate in a mentorship program, guiding young veterans who were returning home and struggling to adjust to civilian life. Michael thought for a moment. He had no desire for recognition, but he understood the need. He could help others, the way older veterans once helped him. The first meeting was small, held in a quiet room at the base. Michael sat with 4 young men, their eyes tired but alert. Some had lost friends, some were battling memories, and others simply felt lost in the shift from military life to civilian life. He spoke gently. "You are not alone," he said. "What you've been through cannot be erased. But it can be carried. You can carry it with respect, with love for those who stood with you, and with care for those who depend on you now. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to continue." The young veterans listened quietly. For some, Michael's words pierced through the armor they had built. A few nodded, a few had tears glimmering in their eyes. He did not offer empty encouragement. He offered understanding, experience, and empathy. After the session, one of the young men approached him. "Sir," he said, "I thought I had lost everything when I left. But you make me see that I can still carry my past without letting it control me." Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have always carried it," he said. "You just needed to remember how." Meanwhile, at home, Anna continued to grow. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and often spoke about the lessons her father shared with others. One evening, she asked, "Dad, do you ever feel proud of what people say about you?" Michael shook his head. "I don't need praise, Anna. What matters is that I help others and that you know the right way to live. That is the only measure of worth I care about." Anna hugged him tightly. "Then I'm proud, Dad. I always will be." The story of Michael's mentorship began to reach further. Veterans who attended his sessions told their families, friends, and communities. Even George's company shared parts of his journey, not as a story of fame, but as a story of quiet strength and perseverance. At one point, George invited Michael to a private meeting. "Michael," he said, "I have spent decades building businesses, leading people, and accumulating wealth. But watching you work, watching how you guide young veterans, it has taught me more than any seminar or textbook ever could. You remind me that true leadership is humility, courage, and love." Michael smiled faintly. "I'm just a man doing what he can," he replied. "Others did more. I carry their memory." George nodded, understanding fully. "But that memory matters. Because of you, others are inspired. Because of you, hope spreads." One evening, Michael and Anna were walking home from school when they passed a group of Marines on the street. They recognized him immediately. They saluted, some with wide smiles, others with solemn nods. Anna whispered, "Dad, they still remember you." Michael took her hand. "It is not about being remembered, Anna. It is about being worthy of the memory we carry." She looked up at him with bright eyes. "Then you are more than worthy, Dad." That night, Michael sat by the window, reflecting. The world outside buzzed with stories, recognition, and attention. Inside his small home, he found peace in the quiet moments, Anna sleeping soundly, the warm light of the lamp, the steady rhythm of his heart. He thought of the men he had served with, those who never came home, and of the younger veterans now learning from his experience. "You would be proud," he whispered into the darkness. "I am carrying your legacy, and I am helping them carry theirs." Outside, the moon hung low, casting silver light across the small yard. The night was still, filled with quiet strength, and Michael knew that his true work, the work of honor, love, and guidance, was only beginning. And though the world may have seen him as a hero, he remained the same man he always had been, a single dad, a veteran, and a man devoted to the quiet power of love and duty. The years passed quietly, yet steadily. Michael and Anna continued their simple life, filled with small routines and warm moments. The story of the single dad veteran who had silenced Marines and a CEO had become known far and wide, but at home, Michael remained unchanged. He still woke early, made breakfast, walked Anna to school, and spent his evenings teaching her about life, courage, and kindness. Anna was growing fast, bright and confident. She often spoke of her father with pride, telling her teachers and friends about the lessons she learned from him. But she never exaggerated. To her, Michael's greatness was not in the stories told by newspapers or Marines, it was in the quiet actions he carried every day, in the care he showed her and others. One afternoon, the Marine Corps invited Michael to attend a ceremony honoring veterans who had shown extraordinary service to their communities. George was also present, quietly observing, no cameras or cameras crews this time, just respect for the moment. Michael stood among the veterans, all of whom had unique stories. Some had achieved fame, others had fought in battles far away, but none moved the audience the way Michael did. When it was his turn to speak, he walked to the podium slowly, Anna holding his hand for support. "I have never sought recognition," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I served because it was my duty. I raised my daughter because she is my world. The lessons I share today come not from pride, but from memory of friends who never returned, memory of the love that gives us strength every day." The room was silent, the kind of silence that demands attention, reflection, and respect. Marines and civilians alike listened intently. Even George felt the weight of Michael's words, realizing that his wealth and influence could never match the quiet power of this man's heart. Michael continued. "True courage is not loud. It is steady. It is loving. It is carrying what others cannot carry. You may face hardship, loss, or fear, but if you act with integrity and love, you will find strength you never imagined." When he finished, the audience remained quiet for a long moment. Then, one by one, the veterans and Marines began to applaud. Not the loud applause of excitement, but the deep, respectful applause of understanding. Anna's eyes shone with pride, and she squeezed her father's hand tightly. Later, outside the ceremony hall, George approached Michael. "You have taught me more than I could ever teach anyone," he said softly. "Your courage, your love, your humility, it has changed the way I see the world." Michael shook his head gently. "I only live as I must," he said. "If others learn from it, that is enough." Anna tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "look at them. Everyone respects you. You inspire them." Michael smiled faintly. "It is not me they see," he said. "It is the memory of all who stood before me, and it is the hope for those who will come after." That evening, as they walked home together, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. He had lived through wars, struggles, and the quiet battles of daily life. He had raised Anna with love, taught her right from wrong, and carried the memory of his fallen brothers with honor. At home, Anna placed her schoolwork aside and climbed onto his lap. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you," she said. "I want to help people, just like you help veterans and others." Michael kissed the top of her head. "You already are brave, Anna," he said. "Bravery is not in being fearless. It is in facing life with love and doing what is right, even when it is hard. And one day, you will teach others the same way I have tried to teach you." Anna smiled sleepily and leaned against him. Michael held her close, feeling the weight of years behind him and the promise of the future in front. He thought of his brothers, of those who had not returned, and whispered softly, "I hope you are proud. I carry you always." Outside, the stars began to appear, shining softly above their small home. The world beyond was full of noise, of stories, of fame and recognition. But inside that quiet house, Michael found the only truth he had ever needed: the peace of a life lived with integrity, love, and devotion. He had left Marines and a CEO silent, yes, but more importantly, he had shown his daughter the power of quiet courage. He had carried the past, guided the present, and left hope for the future. And in Anna's eyes, that was the greatest victory of all. As Anna drifted to sleep, Michael stayed by the window, looking at the moonlight dancing across the yard. He knew life would continue, challenges would come, and history would remember many more events. But he had done his part. He had lived with honor, loved without condition, and raised a daughter who would continue that legacy. And for Michael, that was more than enough.